Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome inside the Fan Cave, and welcome to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Bob Pompeani here, joined by Andrew Fillipponi up at 93.7 The Fan, the PM team. And Pony, we saw something that we haven't seen in quite some time. Speaking about defense, a team with the #1 scoring and #1 total team defense won Super Bowl. We haven't seen that, I think, since Seattle in 2013. And on top of that, we saw a team that led the NFL in rushing offense, more rushing yards than passing yards. This is 2025. You don't expect to see those two things on top of your list. But, man, that's a complete effort by Philadelphia last night. And they made Patrick Mahomes look antsy, uncertain, and certainly rattled at times. What an effort by them.
Well, it made me feel like football's not a one-man game anymore. You know, for such a long time, the sport's been dominated by Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. And so many people have said, well, as long as you have Mahomes or you have Brady, you're going to win. And it was nice to see, for once, a departure from that. We've only seen it a few times in the last few years where a team that did not have one of those two guys at quarterback had the Lombardi trophy and the confetti come down on them. So I do think that's generally good for the NFL. Now, in the Eagles' case, it almost forces you to build a perfect roster where they did amazing things. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean back-to-back. They signed Zach Bond in free agency. The draft before that, they picked Jalen Carter when he was falling in the draft, and he's been an absolute stud. A.J. Brown trade. They drafted Jalen Hurts when they still had Carson Wentz. I mean, they fired coordinators there after the end of last season. So they've made a lot of bold, aggressive moves, and it's paid off. So, yeah, it's not just all about the quarterback, and I think that makes, at least me, think the Steelers and other teams that don't have a Mahomes have a better chance, but it forces a team to really get everything else right.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. When you look at some of the, if you look back at the Carson Wentz situation, when he went to Indianapolis, they got back some picks, and they've turned them into some really good players. I think you mentioned DeJean being one of them. Quinyon Mitchell was the second one. There was somebody else in there as well. But that also goes to show you, if you make deals at the right time, even though you may not feel like you have to do it, good things can happen down the road. And I think Howie Roseman is somebody who's thinking ahead of a lot of teams out there in what to do next. And I know the Steelers would love to pattern themselves after this team in a lot of ways, and that's fine, except you got to come up with the right people to do it, and it's a lot easier said than done. They have drafted a lot of guys on their offensive line with first-round picks, second-round picks. They need to do the same on the defensive side of the ball and come up with guys like that who can be game wreckers on their own.
And I mean, bottom line is really, Kansas City was a smoke and mirrors team. They were not truly a 15-win team. They were, I think, 11-0 in one-score games. The things that past Steelers teams have done, like this year's team before they lost 5 straight, or the team that started undefeated and lost to Washington in 2020, did the same things where they won all the close games and really didn't look like a dominant team. So we only gave really Kansas City that benefit of the doubt because they won the last 2 Super Bowls. But on paper, they were nowhere close to as good as Philadelphia. One thing I do reject, Bob, in all of this, I do not agree with it at all. Some Steelers fans have posited this. I think it's complete hogwash. I do not see barely any similarities between Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. I think that's one of the most asinine takes I've heard coming out of that game last night. Jalen Hurts has played Patrick Mahomes twice in the Super Bowl, and for my money, he has outplayed him both times. Yep. Exactly. And Justin Fields is a fabulous runner. But if you think those two guys have anything in common as passers of the football, well, then I got news for you. Because Justin Fields was offered up to the entire NFL in trades this offseason, and the most he got back was a 6th-round pick that could have been a 4th-round pick by the Steelers. Bob, he might be able to be a mobile quarterback. He's nothing like Jalen Hurts, who proved last night that he is an upper echelon quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no question about that. If you doubted him, all you had to do is watch him. And yes, he has that ability in the pocket to make perfect passes. He made a lot of them last night. We got to go to a break, but we offer up tonight's poll of the night. You can hit this up on KDKA.com/connect. And this is about what is going to begin on Wednesday in both Montreal and Boston. That would be the Four Nations Faceoff involving Finland, Sweden, USA, and Canada. And we asked the question, who's going to win this thing?
Where is the Czech?
They all should be there.
Nation?
I hate when politics carries over into sports because it has no business doing that. They should be in there, but they're not, so we have to deal with what we have to deal with. And so far, Canada is leading. But I got to tell you, I'll make my pick of USA. I think Mike Sullivan, I'm going too long, I realize. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, hang on. Mike Sullivan has the tools now to play the kind of hockey he wants to play with. He doesn't have it here necessarily, and that's why they get in trouble. But with that USA team, which I think has a clear advantage in goal, I look for USA to win it all. What do you say? Let us know on that QR code, and we'll be back with more as we continue right here with the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call on KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan. Our GMC Sierra tweet of the night comes from Jeff Kerr of CBS. Says the Eagles are the first Super Bowl champion with more rushing yards than passing yards for an entire season, which includes the playoffs since the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers. Welcome back to our program. Bob Pompeani and Andrew Fillipponi with you tonight. Real quick before I want to get your take on this. As far, I think it's interesting. There's going to be some very entertaining hockey, to be sure, but you're right about the teams that aren't there. But of those who are, which one do you think will win?
Well, I think Sweden's underrated. I mean, they got a real shot. Rickard Rakell has played great hockey. We'll see if Erik Karlsson can kind of turn back the clock and maybe feel liberated by putting on his country sweater. But I'm a little bit disappointed in the roster selection by the United States team here, Bob. We got Chris Kreider and Brock Nelson on this roster. They would not make an NHL All-Star team roster. I think we've got great young players here that we're making in the United States. Cole Caulfield in Montreal, Clayton Keller in Utah, Jason Robertson for the Dallas Stars, Alex Tuck for the Buffalo Sabres. These are guys having huge years. And we let the politics of hockey, what guys did years ago, I think interfere with putting together the best roster. Chris Kreider should be watching the games at home with you and me. And he should not be in Boston or Montreal. And I hope that those decisions do not come back to bite this team. Because, and I like JT Miller a lot, but the idea that JT Miller is going to be on a top line with Jack Eichel, that's the projected line I saw. That makes no sense when you've got guys like Caulfield, Bob, who can score 40 or 50 goals.
And he's
at home,
young,
not playing in this tournament.
I agree with that because it's Montreal. I thought he was the one. I mean, there are a lot of people you could put in there. But Billy Guerin's the GM of this team. Billy Guerin likes those guys and the veteran presence that they bring, but I tend to agree with everything you just said there because I could have made a list of guys who I would have put ahead of a lot of those guys. But I do like goaltending. You're only going to play a few of these games, Andrew. You have Connor Hellebuck and Jake Ottinger in goal. That's a big advantage for me. And I think that's going to be the reason the USA team wins. So will be interesting to see. I want to see.
Well, how about that projected
Crosby.
top line for Canada? Is it true that it's going to be Crosby, McKinnon, and McDavid? If that's true,
I didn't see that put together. But that's listen. The one thing you want to do if you play Canada is do not go in the penalty box because they're gonna come at you with all sorts of ammunition there. I didn't see that as the top line. I thought who else was on with? It was Crosby, McKinnon, and somebody else. I forget who it was. I'll come back to it. But they have a plethora of talent. They could choose from just about anyone out there. So don't go in a penalty box. Goaltending advantage USA. Going to be fascinating to watch. It's better than an all-star game. You would admit that, right? I mean, I'm tired of watching all-star games.
But I just don't like the fact that guys like David Pastrnak and Nikita Kucherov and Alex Ovechkin are not playing in this tournament when rosters could have been put together with those countries, and we could have made this a better, more competitive. We could have crowned a true international champion, Bob, if we would have included those teams.
I understand, but it is just it's an exhibition. It's not an Olympic venue. It's not any of that.
Well, an exhibition should not stop the NHL season for 2 weeks.
No, I agree with that.
That is a joke.
It's too long, but I think it's better than an all-star game, which we've seen way too many times. It's just not fun to watch. All right, let's go to our number one Cochrane Go One Better caller of the night, beginning with Jim in Millvale. What's up, Jim? How are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. What's up?
Why can't the Steelers sign Cooper Kupp?
You got to trade for him, probably. Unless he's released, I don't think that's going to happen. They'll have to make some sort of. Although you never know. He and Deebo Samuel both have a year on a contract left. So, Pony, I quite frankly don't want any of them. I'd rather just figure out a way to get younger and better there with other considerations. Those two guys, they're good players. They're often injured. They're older. I don't want to go in that direction.
So it is alarming to me that two teams that really know offensive football with offensive head coaches, Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, have both come to the conclusion that they're better off without those two guys. And especially if you watch San Francisco, with the Ayuk injury, with Christian McCaffrey's injury, the 49ers were dying for a playmaker. And Samuel had his worst year in years, and he was largely healthy, much more this season than the last one. And he had a huge drop against the Rams in a game they needed to win when he talked about how he wasn't getting the ball enough days before, which, by the way, do we want another guy like that who's going to be complaining about his role in an offense, especially when he's not the player he once was? However, with Samuel, Bob, I can see Arthur Smith looking at him as a much better version of Cordero Patterson and wanting a jack-of-all-trades player in the offense like that.
Yeah, and that's what he does. When he's at his game, he can run the ball. He's a good blocker when he's engaged, and he can go down the field. So I would understand that. I just don't know that it's a fit here. Plus, there are going to be other teams interested. The Commanders can certainly use somebody like that, and other teams around the NFL. I want to ask you about the quarterback. Now we've had a little bit of a pushback, it seems, from those who thought Russell Wilson was no way coming back here. Now there seems to be some belief. And Mark Caboli told us last night on our Showdown show that he thinks there's an opening for Wilson. Do you want to see that happen? Or what is your plan when it comes to quarterbacks? Because there are other names coming at you now with Aaron Rodgers out there, trade possibilities with other guys. Who do you foresee as the Steelers starter coming up in 2025?
Well, I would bet on Justin Fields. But this idea now that Russell Wilson is somehow back in it, I tend to believe Jay Glazer on this. Given Jay Glazer's relationship with Mike Tomlin, I don't believe Jay Glazer would have spoken in absolutes or really left no room for a Russell Wilson reunion if he thought it was possible. And we know how close he is to Mike. I don't think he would go out on a limb like that unless he was 100% sure. So the other things that get put out there, I wonder about leverage from the Steelers to try to bring Justin Fields' price down. I wonder about Russell Wilson's camp and trying to make it seem like the Steelers are in on him to create a market for him. When Glazer talks about the Steelers and he doesn't speculate or hypothesize, I think it's basically a fact that he got from the coach, Bob. So I'm of the opinion that there's no way Russell Wilson's back after he made those comments this week at the Super Bowl.
You know, in those comments on that podcast, also, he was quick to dismiss Fields originally, too. He said, nah. He left the door open, but he didn't make it sound like it was a totally done deal. So
no, you're right.
I'm going to be interested to see how they handle this whole situation, what it means. And, you know, they have the tampering day coming up. I think it's a month from now? It's somewhere in that range, 3 to 4 weeks from now. The legal tampering, which I always found an interesting name for a period of time where you can get stuff done. If you're the Steelers, if you have eyes on Justin Fields as your starter, you have to. I would imagine that has to be done sooner rather than later, don't you?
Well, you'd want to do that because you don't want other teams to drive up his price.
Do you think there'll be a market for him?
I don't think he's going to get $20 million a year, Bob, if that's what you're asking. I think there's going to be a market for him to be a very cheap starter or a very expensive backup.
Right.
And so that's what you're going to be competing against, offers that are probably around $15 million for him. Now, my opinion is I'd rather just start over and have a year with a clean slate at quarterback again with very cheap options and try to build up the rest of the team in free agency in the draft. And if that doesn't work, fine. You just go into 2026 and try to draft the guy. The last thing I want to do is tie up salary cap space on guys that I really don't think I can win with. And unfortunately, I would put Justin Fields in that category right now.
All right, interesting stuff. It's going to be a fascinating offseason, as it always is. We have more coming up. We're going to take a break. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Call us at 412-575-2600. We're on the air 7 nights a week, so don't be a stranger. Let's check in with Ken Rice at the anchor desk, getting set for tonight's KDKA News at 11 o'clock. Ken?
Bob, a bad crash in Beaver County sends a car flying into a home, plus the new tariffs President Trump is imposing, and Ray Petland tracking another first alert weather day, all coming up next at 11, Bob.
All right, Ken, thanks very much. Pony, before we sign off here, I want to get your take on Pitt. They lost Damian Dunn now for the rest of the season, it would appear. Coming off a tough loss at North Carolina. Tonight, North Carolina got blown out by Clemson, a team I really like. And that could be a sleeper team in the tournament. But what are your odds of now Pitt making the NCAA tournament? What would they have to do in the final month here to make themselves in a position to get in?
They're 5-7. They got 8 games left in the ACC. I think they got to win 7 of them. And
Wow.
It's not out of the question because the schedule's pretty easy. They've got really only 2 good teams left.
This is a tough one tomorrow.
SMU tomorrow, and then they got at Louisville, and the rest of them are pretty much cupcakes. Really bad teams. I think they got to win one of those 2 games, and my prediction is they will go to SMU and win tomorrow night. I think SMU, if you look at them, they've gotten blasted by Duke, by North Carolina, by Louisville. The really good teams in the league have not just beaten them, they've stomped them. And so this is an extremely desperate Pitt team, and I anticipate that they will play a really good game against SMU tomorrow night. But they can't have any other screw-ups, Bob. They can't have a stub-your-toe game against a Notre Dame or an NC State or somebody like that the rest of the way.
The only thing about SMU is they have a big guy inside, and it seems like Pitt does not have an answer for that. They have guys who are tall. The Diaz, Graham guys are 6'11" and 7 foot. Cam Corn's a big guy, but it doesn't seem like they really assert themselves down low in that situation. I don't know if that's going to be a problem tomorrow. I suspect it may be, but they're going to have to get hot from the outside. And one of the things they haven't done lately is down the stretch when they need to make shots, they haven't made shots. And if you're going to be a guard-oriented team, you better make those shots, and they certainly did not in North Carolina and other games as well.
They got to find ways to get those guards to the basket because if they don't score and they get fouled, they make all their free throws, Bob. And that would, to me, be the plan.
All right, we see our KDKA.com Connect poll. Who will win the 4 nations? It looks like the winner is the United States based on this.
You talked them into it, Bob. The power of your rhetoric. Well done, Bob.
I look for those 2 playing in the finals. That's going to do it, Pony. Thanks. Good night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.